Hello everyone, nice to meet you. My name is Alda and I have had a very lucky opportunity to help with YLI before. Either it is from the program designing, but also when it comes to the application process as well. So as we select candidates for the next program. And for today, we would like to share with you some tips and tricks when it comes to essay writing, because as some of you know, when it comes to applying for YLI, one of the things that we ask for you to do is to submit an essay. This video is actually a continuation of another video that we did on tips and tricks on CV writing. So if you have not checked that video out, please make sure you do so. Now, for this video, right, just to recap a little bit in terms of what we are asking you to do when writing the essay. The clear question or topic of the essay is around your leadership experience, right? Now, we're pretty sure that as you are watching this video, most likely what's going to happen is that you already have a huge set of experiences when it comes to demonstrating your leadership abilities, right? So this might come across as a little bit, where do I start and everything, but don't worry, we're gonna get through that later. But for now, yes, the topic is around your leadership experience. Now, what you can ask yourself, right, is that there are actually three types of stories or essays, right, that we usually encourage you to submit. One of the three. So it could either be an experience where it's a lead self story. So an event when you are actually leading yourself to do something in order to change a particular situation, right? The second type is leading a team. Most of our candidates, by the way, have experienced this in one way or another, right? So, for example, if you were part of a student organization, and then you happen to be the one of the leaders, for example, even if it's whether it's a function leader, a division leader, or the president altogether, then it means that you have had the opportunity to lead a team before. This one's pretty straightforward, right? So the third one is around leading change, right? Now this is pretty much like leading team. It's just that scope-wise, it's much wider, right? Because it usually involves involving the community, right? Or you're solving a particular social or nation issue, right? So I'm gonna share with you some examples in the past where I've personally reviewed a couple of essays myself, and I'm gonna share with you two of them that were pretty memorable for me, which are, one is lead self and the other one is lead change, right? So the lead self essay, and the story really stuck in my head even until this moment, right, is around this young lady who was pursuing her studies in an Australian university. And basically what she shared with us was her personal journey in encouraging herself to be more confident in taking up leadership positions. Right? So essentially, the first time she'd gotten into that uni, she was very struggling when it comes to her own confidence level, right? She did not have many experiences before. She did not have a lot of friends. She didn't know how to really get into a student organization. And even when she did, she was one of the minorities because apparently it was a very male-dominated organization, right? So she felt very overwhelmed. She doesn't really know how to express herself, whether it's okay to be vocal about things, to raise issues, and so on and so forth. So she really stressed that struggle, right? And then what happened was that she tried to build her own confidence by just taking risks and doing things as she goes. And at the end, she finally made it as the president of the whole student organization, right? Now that's an incredible lead self story because it's a challenge that she was experiencing herself. It's a very personal matter, right? The other example that I wanted to share with you was leading change, right? And again, this was one of the essays that really caught my attention, right? And I still remember it to this moment. And I remember actually the YLI participant, this person, she actually succeeded and then became one of the superstars as well in the program. So this young lady, it's actually a combination of lead self and also lead change, right? So what happened was that she suffered from depression, right? So she was having a lot of struggles in her uni life, but also mentally, also she was there was a lot of times where she lost control, right? Which was very troubling. What happened was the lead self part of it was that she one day really wanted to harm herself, but she decided to just stop and then went to see a professional, right? All by her own decision, right? When that happened, things got better and better each day. She actually got not 100% completely cured, but really in a much more better spiritual and emotional state as she was before, right? Now that's good, but what really caught my attention was then what she did after that, right? So because of such a personal story and journey, she decided, what if a lot of people are experiencing this as well? Right? So what she did was that she actually described how this personal experience inspired her to then create smaller communities in her university for people who also suffer depression, right? And very simple things. So creating a student organization for that and then taking it up outside of the university and then partnering with NGOs that are really passionate about the matter as well. And now she has a lot of branches in several cities, right? So you get the gist, hopefully. Now your story may not be as extreme as the one that I share with you, but don't worry, right? And the most important thing is that there's no need to exaggerate or make up a story, right? Because we will know one way or another. There are still a lot of things that you can do to catch our attention, even if your story is a simple, I led a team in uni, and we'll get to that later. Basically, again, as I mentioned in the beginning, right? Now that you know what we're looking for, you might feel a little bit overwhelmed. But that's okay, because it's completely normal. If you are overwhelmed, in fact, it's actually good news for us, because it might mean that you do have a lot of interesting stories to share with us, right? And that you just don't know which one to pick out. And it's completely normal. Now, when it comes to writing an essay, there are 3 things that you need to consider. Number 1 is purpose of the essay. Number 2 is structure of the essay. And number 3 is how to make it look professional, right? Now let me go through one by one by also stating the common mistakes that we usually see in YLI essays, right? So number 1, purpose. Remember, why is it that we want you to submit an essay, right? Basically, the reason why is because we would like to give you an opportunity to express a story, express a story that is close to you, right? That also demonstrate your leadership skill, right? Now remember, an essay is not an opportunity for you to copy paste whatever you had in your CV, but be sure and be reminded that the topic is very specific, right? And we still see this common mistake, by the way, that people want to share as many things as possible, so they just literally copy paste whatever they put on their CV onto their essay. That is not what we want in YLI, right? What we want in YLI is for you to choose one story. That's all. So that's the number 1 easy step that you can do, right? Remember what we are asking you to do. Pick one story, okay? Now, apart from that, also know your audience, right? Which in this case is the YLI team. Now, the YLI team has probably seen a lot of essays before as well, right? So just be mindful as you go through it in terms of how you can stand out, right? And then develop your key messages around how can you answer the question, how can you come up with key messages that are relevant for this topic, right? That is on the purpose. The second thing is on structure. Now, this is probably the biggest and most common mistake that candidates usually do, right? As you go on and tell people about your story, sometimes it's very easy to get lost in the chronological order or in the sequencing, right? Now, we would like to share with you today in detail about this, but in short, your essay should be clearly structured to, number one, explain what the situation is, right? Number two, what is the complication or what were the challenges that you faced? And then number three, the resolution or what was the solution that you contributed, right? And then how to make a great essay is also touch on the impact as well, right? And what we want to highlight here, right, is that don't think that the kinds of essays and stories that we're looking for are the very superstar, flawless, rainbow-looking story when you have not faced any challenges before, right? In fact, if you have faced challenges and complications, we want you to pick that one probably, because what's really important for us to know is how do you bring yourself to that situation, how do you solve that situation, and also what impact you created out of that, right? Last but not least is how to make it look as professional as possible, right? Now remember, in the case of applying to YLI, right? YLI is a professional program, right? So you do want to sound professional as well as you write your story, right? The way to do this is to use standard professional English to begin with, right? And remember not to do any spelling or grammatical mistakes. What you can do is turn on your autocorrect or have someone review it. Avoid this silly tiny mistakes, right, that you can already do. But in terms of the language that you use, right, be sure that it's professional enough that you would actually use this kind of language during an interview, for example. Be professional in communicating it. Use concise language as well, right? Because again, you only have 500 words, and make sure not to use a language that is too complicated or words that are too complicated. Simple, plain English is fine. In terms of the actual steps, right? Number one, again, it's about understanding your audience, right? This will then very easily help you to pick and choose which topic you should write on, right? Number two is then laying out what are the key messages, right? So now that you know the structure, start to build around the content itself. What is it that you want them to know, basically? The next step is actually storylining, right? What is storylining? It's basically putting your content onto paper or Word or whatever in bullet points to provide a skeleton for your essay. I want to remind you that storylining, once you have your skeleton, you probably already have 80% of the work done, right? Once you have that, then you start writing. And literally what this means is translating whatever bullet points you have into sentences, right? Usually, if you have all the content, this will come in very naturally for you, and then you just need to translate it to sentences. Now, let me talk a little bit more about number one first, right? Which is choosing a story which will influence the reader the most, right? And the reason why, by the way, this step is super important, not only for when you want to apply for YLI, by the way. You can actually use this step for when you apply to other opportunities as well that does require essay writing, right? So for example, in YLI, we're asking you to choose a leadership story, but surely you've seen cases where you want to apply for a scholarship and then they want you to explain a little bit more about the purpose for you to apply the scholarship, right? Or getting into a master's degree or an MBA. Whatever it is, remember to do step number one, because if you do step number one wrongly, There's no point. Do not hope that you're going to get the rest of the steps correct, right? So again, understand your audience, understand the purpose. Let it sit in you for a while. Now, last but not least is which of your experiences show that, right? The easiest way to do this is to look back at your CV, right? Because again, your CV should be an accurate snapshot of your professional story, right? Which should list out already the moments in time in the past 3 to 5 years where you have demonstrated leadership abilities, right? And so from that list, you can then pick and choose which one was the most impactful one, right? Which one was it that you contributed the most, right? Usually, because this is your own story, it'll come to you within 5 seconds. The next thing that I'd like to share with you is probably the most important thing, as I mentioned in the beginning, right? Because a lot of candidates get this wrong. A lot of candidates jumble up the situation and then what they did and then the challenges, and the most common thing is not describing what the impact was, right? So I've mentioned this in the beginning, but I'm going to repeat this again, right? 4 questions you need to answer, right? What was the situation that you were in, right? And basically, we would like you to describe what initiative or what organization you were part of, right? And what was your role as well, right? Because from one candidate to another, it can be very, very different, right? So basically, let's look at an example here, right? Like what we have on this slide, right, is a student who has an experience in arranging a festival for music and art, right? And basically, this student led a team of 50 people, right? To do what? To design the concept, raise funds, and execute the event. You see now, like when we see these points, right? You can see clearly how, as someone who doesn't know you, who doesn't know your university or anything, you set the context basically, right? Situation is all about setting the context. It's the background information, right? Just like you see in movies, when you're about to watch a new movie, set the context first, right? The next thing is talk about the complications, right? And this involves challenges, basically, right? When you did that experience, when you face that experience, very likely it spans for quite a long period of time, right? Like medium to a long period of time. Very less likely that it's something that happens overnight or like 2 days, right? So let's say you were taking up for in this case, the challenges and complications that this person was facing was how to manage around approvals, right? So managing the university principals to approve of the event itself, right? And so apart from that one, right, what this person experienced is basically unexperienced students as committee members, right? So students who've not really worked in an organization settings before, right? And the third challenge would be very, very limited amount of time to raise enough funds, right? So for this one, it's actually coming back to you, right? Whether you would like to state one challenge only, but a pretty significant one, or you want to state, as this person is doing, several challenges, right? This one is completely up to you. But the most important thing is that when you talk about the next one, which is resolution, is that you need to address it one by one, right? So if you decided to go with one big challenge, you talk about how you resolve that challenge. If you choose to talk about multiple challenges like this person did, then make sure that you address it one by one, right? Let's take a look at the example here, right? So for the first challenge in managing the principal's approvals, this person tried to persuade the principals, persuading one principal to become the event supervisor, right? What this tells us, right, behind the scenes, is that we know that this person has the courage to do that and hold this principal accountable for that event, by the way, right? And so what happened was that approvals became very easy, right? Number two, the challenge was unexperienced students, right? And so what this person did was creating multiple team bonding sessions, right? In order to strengthen the bond, basically, amongst the team members, to reflect on whatever is it that they're struggling with, right? The things that we can imagine are things that they've never experienced before, talk through it, and then work on improvement opportunities together, right? Last but not least, the challenge was limited amount of time to raise funds. Now, the way this person handled that is to quickly, proactively list out the most potential companies to approach and then start execution, right? Start reaching out to the companies one by one, right? What this implies to us is the ability to prioritize, right? Like which company, right? And so you can see how the resolutions listed out here correspond one-to-one to the challenges that the student stated. Okay? Now, this is what I'm about to tell you is the common mistake that candidates do is that they would stop at resolutions, right? How to make an essay look from good to great is this coming up step, which is describing the impact, right? Now, look at the example that we have here. In this case, a couple of impacts that the student showed was that the event was successful indeed. It was the first one to be pioneered, in fact, right? Apart from that, this person also wrote about the results, right? When it comes to raising funds of 20,000 US dollars, right? And quantifying your impact is extremely important, by the way, right? Because it gives and provides a clearer visual, right? For the readers, right? Now, apart from stating the amount, what this person succeeded to do is also comparing it to the previous, to the target, right? So the target was 15K, but this person managed to raise up until 20K, right? Now that's a very, very powerful one. And this person also did not forget to put the time frame as well, which is 3 months, right? Apart from this, another example of a great quantifying of impact is how many participants this event managed to attract, right? In this case, it was 1,800 participants, right? And then last but not least, not only that, this person also mentioned that it provided the opportunity for 50 students to have organizational experience as well, right? Now, the kinds of impacts that you quantify may be the same as this one, but it could be different as well, right? But it's for you to communicate that and articulate that clearly because it does give a clearer image in your readers' minds, right? So again, do not forget to describe the impact. So that was pretty much it when it comes to tips and tricks of writing an essay. To point out again, right, it's all about the relevance of your topic, right? So make sure you really answer the question. And number two, it's really about how you structure your essay as well, right? Because at the end of the day, you only have 500 words. Make sure that you articulate 4 things. Number 1 is situation. Number 2 is challenges or complications. Number 3 is resolutions, how you solve them. And last but not least, do not forget about the impact, right? So that was it. Hopefully you found this video useful. And if you are indeed still interested to apply for YLI, which we hope you are, please don't be discouraged and do so. We are looking forward to read your essays. Thank you so much and hope to see you at the forum.